Hello, and welcome to our second lecture for week 2 of this Humanities 2 class. First of all, I wanted to remind you guys that the essays that you'll be turning in this class, the subjects for all 3 of those are on your syllabus. All right, those are 3 to 5 pages. And you can use any materials that you wish. Anything we have from this class, anything in the book, anything in the PowerPoints and my lectures. The questions are relatively wide open, and that's intentional. All right, there are lots of different answers to those questions. And I just want you to have a little bit of fun with that. Now, those are not due, okay, until our last day of class, which is next week. But I would get working on them as we're rolling here. I also wanted to just remind everyone to try and participate in those online discussions, okay? Those are part of your grade. And some of you folks are doing it. If you're doing it, great. If not, it's a great time to jump on there. Okay. Today we are going to move on from Marx and study the ideas, or some of the ideas, of a man named Friedrich Nietzsche. Now, Nietzsche is a philosopher around the same time as Marx, maybe a little bit after him in the 19th century. And he has a lot of ideas. If Marx talks about the economy, all right, Nietzsche talks about us as individuals. And the reason we study Nietzsche, okay, is because he's an interesting individual who has ideas that build on those of Marx and Darwin and Freud, and they all fit into this general narrative about the secularization of society, okay? And what that term means is removing the church from its most important place in society. Now, a quick note. Nietzsche dies in 1900. A lot of his philosophies are promoted by the Nazis in the 40s. The fact that he dies in 1900, right, should mean that we can't really blame Nietzsche for being used by the Nazis, okay? And you're going to hear some ideas in here that are going to sound, they should make you a little uncomfortable. But I want to try, just like not blaming Marx for Stalin, I want to try to have a little bit of a conversation about these ideas in their own right, okay? Now, this is a very famous quote from Nietzsche. All right, you can read that quote for just a moment. One of the things that Nietzsche is famous for, again, is promoting the idea that we as human beings have in our own minds, all right, the power to think and the power to create the kind of world and the kind of person that we want to be. All right, one of the reasons we study Nietzsche is because he is a step along the path that takes European thought, all right, away from a world in which these massive structures that have dominated Europe for hundreds of years, all right, the Catholic Church being one of them. He tries to destroy those structures, right, and tries to push us in a direction to which we can understand that we are in control of our lives, all right, whatever kind of person we want to be, we can just wake up and put on our big boy pants and go out and be it. So again, he has a lot of quotes like this, all right, meaning that perception of reality is what dictates how we live our lives. If I understand the world a certain way and you understand it in a very different way, we are going to be different people, and that's okay. All right? So let's learn a little bit about Nietzsche's life, and then we'll talk about some of his ideas. Now, Nietzsche's born in 1844, so he's born about 30 years or so after Marx. He is born in Prussia, and he's born again at this very dynamic time. Remember, the 1848 revolutions occur when Nietzsche is just a wee man, okay, of 4. Prussia is a wealthy, powerful, and a militaristic place. Now, as Nietzsche develops, goes to graduate school, and later goes to teach, all right, he has these basic areas of interest. Okay, now ethics, the study of ethics, is the study of morality, it's the study of society and history. Psychology, a very new field in the 1840s, is basically the study of the human mind. All right, why do we believe the things we believe? Why do we do the things we do? Remember that we're hurtling on towards people like Freud, people like Jung, all right, psychoanalysis. And it's important to think that people like Nietzsche, all right, imagine that the human mind works in certain ways, and they're not always ways which are obvious. Okay? He also was a student of philosophy and a student of history. Again, the liberal arts education in the 19th century is broad and wide-reaching. Now, Nietzsche has a set of 4 or 5 ideas that we're going to examine here. All right? Nietzsche has lots and lots of ideas, but we're just going to cover sort of the meat and potatoes. All right? And you can see them on the slide here. And I know you don't know what they are right now, but I'm going to explain each one of these ideas as we go. All right? Nietzsche taught at the college at Basel. All right? And eventually, Nietzsche dies very young. All right? He dies in 1900, and he was only 55 years old. Now, Nietzsche published a number of books. You can just look at these. We're not really going to go into book by book sort of analysis in this class. We're going to talk more about ideas. All right? A lot of Nietzsche's publications are very popular on college campuses. They're popular on philosophy classes. All right, you might have heard of Nietzsche. Nietzsche has a lot of interesting ideas, and he has a lot of interesting sort of quibs and sound bites. All right, so we're gonna stop. We're gonna start looking into some of these ideas. And again, I am not a philosopher, and this is not a philosophy class. All right, so we're kind of looking at the bare bones ideas that Nietzsche had. All right, and trying to think about how they change both the intellectual life of Europe, but also are going to lead us into major changes in society and politics. So let's look at some of these ideas. Okay, now going from left to right, we do go chronologically here. All right, we're going to begin talking about the master versus the slave morality. Now, Nietzsche was fascinated with ethics and morality, and not necessarily just the sort of what is right and what is wrong, but what is the work that morality does in society. And you're going to see that his vision of morality is very similar to Marx's concept of religion as ideology, right? Morality is a social control. We have a lot of problems with that, but we'll talk about it more. Now, Nietzsche is famous for saying that God is dead. What Nietzsche largely means by this, all right, is that he believed that God is a creation of the human mind, and that we as a society had acted in such immoral ways that we had made the concept of God useless in a modern society. And that's a big one. Don't worry, we'll talk about it some more. Moving on, Nietzsche sees the basic condition of the human being as a will to power. All human beings seek power. Nietzsche thought that one of the problems with morality and religion was that it confined human beings to a subsistence kind of a life. Like, yeah, we can get by, we can do okay, but Nietzsche saw so much more potential in us, all right? The potential to conquer, the potential to be bigger than simply one person. Moving on, he has this very problematic concept of the Übermensch. Now, the Übermensch, all right, is man freed from the shackles of societal morality. All right, it is human beings living their best life. Now, this has no connection to any kind of silly theories about National Socialism and all kinds of Nazi garbage, okay? This is way before that. But his point is that if we free ourselves from these shackles, all right, from religion, from societal morality, things that are used to reinforce the standard social order that keeps us a slave, we can live this wonderful, better life. In his later life, he goes off the rails a little bit, all right, and he gives us this idea of eternal recurrence. All right, and here we deal with different modes of time. It gets real trippy over here. Is time as we see it linear? All right, does it go from the past to the present? Do we live in societies that slowly and steadily improve technologically the way we would like to think they do? Or can we imagine time as a set of concentric circles, basically? History repeating itself time and time and time again, and we simply do not realize the repetition of history because we don't want to, and because it's difficult to think about. All right, linear time is a concept that is just hammered into us, right? Okay, so let's go in and look at some of these concepts a little bit more. Okie dokie. Now, again, Nietzsche comes back to the idea, okay, that morality is social control. All right, the rules of a society are set up by the people who are in charge of that society in order to create stability within that society. And the more you think about this, the more of a troubling idea it is. The people who are in charge make the rules. All right. Now, he says that there are two kinds of morality, and he uses these terms master and slave. Now, we don't necessarily need to reference any kind of social reference in terms of slavery. He's not necessarily talking about the American South. He probably has more of a classical vision in terms of what it means to be a master and what it means to be a slave. But largely, if we're uncomfortable with those terms, we can just take, if we want to go back to Marx, right? Bourgeoisie are the masters and the proletariats are the slaves. Now, basically, these two different kinds of morality are, again, useful for social control. Nietzsche is what we call a moral skeptic, in that he completely explodes the idea of universal morality. For Nietzsche, morality is like any other kind of ideology or social control. Now, we can jive with this idea a little bit if we want to. We can look at the fact that in various kinds of societies, particular actions are either seen as moral or immoral. All right, the idea of universal morality, that some things are right and wrong across all time periods, is really not true. All right, morality is a dynamic set of guidelines that various societies use to attempt to keep some kind of social order. So the morality of medieval Europe would seem shocking and grotesque and barbaric to us. And our current morality, whatever that is, would be very confusing to someone in the 19th century. So, while I have my doubts about some of Nietzsche's theories, we can see, all right, that morality is not static. Morality develops over time, and it is a constantly shifting sort of a thing. If we think about it in our own society, all right, if we think about something like LGBT people or transgendered people, right? People who have struggled to achieve equal rights, say in the last decade. If you took the conversations we have about those kind of folks back into another decade or another century, all right, other people would really not agree with that, right? So we may not want to go as far as Nietzsche goes, but we have to agree, all right, that morality is created by various kinds of societies and that it's dynamic and that it changes from culture to culture. Okay, so this master morality, all right? Basically, what this is that particular societies idealize certain kinds of classes of people and they give them these particular traits, all right? Courage, power, honor, and nobility. All right, we would like to think very much in our society that if someone achieves political power, they achieve political power because they exemplify these kinds of things. All right, they're brave, they're honest, they do the right thing. This is the archetype of leadership. And it was so in the 19th century in Europe, and I believe it's true in the United States today. Now, as far as universal morality goes, all right, basically what Nietzsche is telling us is that things that are good because they please this master class. Things that are bad, all right, are bad because they don't please this master class. Now, again, Nietzsche is making an attempt to completely destroy the idea of universal morality, that there is a right and wrong that is shared by all people in all times, all over the world. And he's basically telling us that we ascribe certain kinds of attributes, very good attributes, all right, to the bosses, to the factory owners, to the wealthy, to the people who are in charge of our society. Now, conversely, all right, he talks about something called the slave morality, all right? And this is a kind of morality that is basically designed to keep the lower classes meek and in line, all right? So what is presented as the proper behavior and morality for non-elite people, all right, is humility, obedience, and weakness. Now, if we think about this, all right, we think about some misquoted Jesus quotes about the meek inheriting the kingdom of heaven. We think about a lot of ideas in different societies, okay, that say that basically the way a society is constructed with rich and poor, all right, is the way society should be constructed. And if you think about religion in a Marxian way as an ideology, then this makes a lot of sense, all right? The slave morality is put forward in Christianity in terms of pacifism, all right, humility, obedience. And if you do these three things, then you get to go to heaven after you're dead. All right? If you follow the path of the slave mortality, it is literally impossible for you to ever have conflict within your society, for you to ever attempt to change your society. Now, one of the most, frankly, very dangerous ideas that is put forward by Nietzsche is called moral relativism. Now, while morality may be dynamic, it is often thought, all right, that there are kind of a set of core beliefs that are sort of the solid core of any kind of morality. All right, don't murder people, don't steal stuff, don't eat people. But for Nietzsche, there is no universal morality. All right, and he has this quote, right? You have your say, your way, I have my way. As for the right way, the correct way, and the only way, it does not exist. So again, Nietzsche here is hammering home this idea, okay, that there is no universal morality. Morality is basically an ideology that is used to buttress or to hold up particular kinds of societal relations. Now you can see here that Marx and Nietzsche really dovetail pretty well together, right? Again, Marx says that religion is ideology that helps support a particular means of production, which helps to produce this unequal society. I think Nietzsche would greatly agree with that. Now, Nietzsche is usually speaking more on societal and personal terms, while Marx is trying to talk about economics and politics. But again, these two men, when you put them together, are really part of what this week is about. All right, trying to tear down the old institutions, the church, the state, kings and queens, things that people had taken for granted. And again, both of them have the same point. Religion and the state are things that are made by people. All right, they're not like trees and mountains. And once we know that they're made by people, that they are constructed systems, right, it's easier for us to conceive about changing them. Now, again, this is going to go dangerous places, right? The fascists in the 1930s and the 1940s are going to, again, attempt to redefine morality in a way that benefits them and in a way that is going to lead us to some pretty dark places. I often think that a universal kind of morality, even a Christian morality, is put in place because we as human beings, we need rules. We don't do well when there are no rules. Now, we may radically define those rules, we may disagree about the rules, but if there's nothing, I think history tells us that human beings go to very, very, very dark places when that is true. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about nihilism. Now, again, one of Nietzsche's most famous quotes, right, is, God is dead. Okay, so what does he mean by that? What Nietzsche really means by that is following along with Marx. He sees that religion is a system that is created by human beings, and as we give birth to this religious and moral system, we are also responsible through our own actions for its death. All right, the main point for Nietzsche is that religion is not some kind of magical spiritual thing. There's no hell, there's no heaven, right? There are only systems of moral control that we impose upon society. And we then, as the creators of religion, have acted so wickedly, we've acted so corruptly throughout the world that we have basically killed the concept of God. Just as Marx told us that religion would not exist in a communist society because inequality would not exist, and religion is basically what he called a balm, right? A lotion for inequality. So Nietzsche tells us, all right, that in this new modern world without a concrete morality, all right, the concept of God is dead. All right, so take a little bit to read that passage. Now, here it lays it out, okay? The concept of God exists in the minds of believers. So as we, as human beings, created a concept for God, okay, because, and we're moving into Freud here too, right? We had a need, we had a desire, we had a worry. We wanted to feel like there was a big daddy who was in charge of everything. And again, going with Marx here now, we invent religion because our current society is so messed up. So we need to feel like, A, there's somebody in charge, and B, yes, society is messed up, but after society will come heaven, and that'll really be great. Now, Nietzsche defines faith as the belief in something that there is no physical proof of. All right, I don't think that there's a terrible explanation of faith. But he then says, okay, that if we're going to set up a system of morality around religion, then we have to follow it. So if we set up this moral system of religion and we don't follow it, that is what Nietzsche means by the death of God. All right, he's really talking about the death of a religious morality that we don't follow. So as we created it, all right, we destroy it. Sorry. Okay. So Nietzsche's next concept here is the will to power. All right. Nietzsche tells us that human beings, all right, intrinsically down at the very base of our human beingness, all right, have a main force that drives us forward. And that force, if we're going to be really honest about it, all right, is the will to power. Now, if we talk about Darwin here, remember, Darwin in the late 19th century is a very new idea. And if we talk about concepts like survival of the fittest, all right, all creatures have a will to survive. Now, Darwin revolutionizes the idea of biology, right? This Victorian idea of biology that is this lovely sort of balance, this kind of Garden of Eden idea of nature. That God created everything and put everything in balance. And Darwin says, well, I don't know about the first part. And the second part really isn't a balance as much as it is sort of a fight to the death every day. All right? Every species struggling and gnawing and clawing at each other. All right? And the survival of the fittest does not mean the survival of the strongest or the fastest. It means the survival of the most adaptable species to their environment. Now, a lot of people in the 19th and early 20th century took Darwin to weird and inappropriate places. And in a way, Nietzsche is one of those people, all right? Using Darwinian theory in terms of human existence and human societies is precarious. Don't do it. But Nietzsche tries to do it. The point is that what Nietzsche's telling us is that the will to power is not necessarily negative, that it is part of our human essence. And the things that hold us back, all right, are the slave morality and our belief in religion. Those are the things that restrict our awesomeness from fully blooming. And he says, why do you live? Not for mere survival, but to expand, to conquer, to grow, and to gain energy which motivates us to live. Now again, we're getting into that part of his thought that's going to seem really scary and Nazi-like. And it's true. The Nazis love Nietzsche because he said things like this, but that is only one interpretation of his thought, and I believe it's a grossly incorrect one. The point for Nietzsche is, if you want to live your best life, all right, you have to abandon these anchors that hold you down. All right, you must abandon the slave mentality and abandon this belief in a God who would construct a world in which you work 8 days a week in some crappy factory and you die early. All right? So we have to purge these ideas from our mind, because beyond these ideas, down deep in our most human of human little secret compartments in our heart, is the will to conquer and the will to have more. Now, we're not talking about having cool stuff like iPhones and whatever, but we're talking about this will to power, to live a better life than we do, to conquer, to do more. if we're always living on the edge, right? If we're pushing forward, and here we could think about pushing into new kinds of science, right? If we're always questioning ideas, if we're not taking things for granted, if we're not doing what we're told by previous generations, right? That's where we find our best life. When we push the powers of human thought, human physical prowess right to the edge. All right? That is what Nietzsche always wants us to do. And dancing. Nietzsche loved dancing. Nietzsche always said that a day without dancing is a wasted day. Odd. I don't really know what the dancing thing's about. But the point is that what Nietzsche's telling us, all right, is that these societal structures, all right, church, morality, are not designed to help us navigate our life, all right? They are designed to help us not live the life that we can. We can do more, and we should. Okay. Now, Übermensch sounds scary. Largely, it sounds scary because it's in German. We could just think of it as Superman. Now, again, we're getting into that part of thought where we're a little nervous because it's getting a little Nazi-ish, and we're thinking about Aryans, and we just gotta kind of wipe that from our mind for a minute. Nietzsche tells us that there are three stages of man. And when he says man, he means human. It's an old-fashioned thing. So, the animal stage, all right? And you could think of this as, living in caves and making stone tools and all that kind of thing. As we evolve and we evolve and we evolve, we come to the human stage. Now, the human stage is very complex. All right? We invent religion, we invent politics, we invent morality, and we have all these systems, right, that are sort of draped around us like a weight around our neck. A lot of these systems we self-internalize. All right, we don't have to be told certain things, right? Our society internalizes them inside of us, right? And we act them out every day, and that's why it's very difficult to get past these things. But he tells us that if we can abandon these other stages of life, if we can get past the crushing effects of religion and morality, we ourselves can live the life of a god. All right? A man can either sink to the animal or rise above to overcome himself and become a god. Now, it is in this godlike stage that we have this massive will to power, right? Where we push everything to the edge of the envelope. And basically, once we understand nihilism, right? The idea that there is no God, and once we understand the perfunctory or the illusionary nature of morality, all right, we can destroy this slave morality. We can overcome self-defeatism, right? The things we do to sabotage ourselves. And we can become like a god. All right. Now, again, a lot of these things sound like things that come out of Nazi Germany. And again, the Nazis made their students read Nietzsche. The Nazis had philosophers, right, who worked with them in explaining how Nietzsche was talking about all their silly nonsense. But to be fair, he wasn't. All right, now Nietzsche's also, anyway, there's a lot more there. So if any of this sounds interesting to you, C&M teaches a lot of philosophy classes, and it's a deep well, and a lot of people really have a sort of basic understanding of Nietzsche, and there's a lot more there. So the final idea really, really gets weird. Basically here in the eternal recurrence, all right, again, we're talking about two different kinds of time, All right, linear time is what most of us go with every day because it's just the only convenient way to view the world. All right, it's impossible to go about your day thinking that you're living in cyclical time. The linear time, right, is just basic 1 year after another. Everything's improving, everything's getting a little better. And, that's the way our society sees time as well. Now, cyclical time, all right, again, is thinking about these circles of time, all right? Things repeat each other. Now, the reality is that both of these ideas of time are true. And I know that's going to bake your noodle, and I'm sorry. Things do evolve and progress over time, all right? Societies are dynamic, but it also repeats itself. Example, what are we all doing inside right now, right? We're inside because of a pandemic. In 1918, there was a pandemic as well, shortly after World War I, that we erroneously call the Spanish flu, even though it began in Kansas. All right, and we're having to relearn the lessons of 1918. So does time literally repeat itself? No, I don't believe that is true. But do societies do the same things over and over and over again and not learn from their mistakes? Yes. Now, Nietzsche, to end on a semi-happy note, all right, gives us the key to immortality. All right? He says, what do we do? How can we achieve eternity and immortality? Basically, Nietzsche tells us that noble acts of noble people. All right, and basically, if you've ever read Gilgamesh, it's the same concept. Nobody ever lives forever, but the acts and the deeds of great people, all right, are remembered by people everywhere forever. We can also think about Nietzsche's writings, right? Nietzsche died in 1900. It's 2020. We're still talking about him. So I think he might have figured that eternity thing out. So finally, he gives us this little passing quote. You must have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star. Basically what Nietzsche is telling us, all right, is that we're going to spend a lot of our life questioning what's going on in the reality around us. And that is the only way that we can free ourselves, all right? Free ourselves from religion, free ourselves from morality, all right? Discover all the wonderful potential within you. Okay, that's going to be our last slide for today. Again, try to jump in on those discussions. Hopefully you've gotten access to the book. If you haven't, please speak up. I'll put some other readings up there. Look at the PowerPoints that are up there. And go back to your syllabus and look at your essay topics. And there are a lot of creative ways to answer those essay topics, all right? They don't just have one answer to them. And I look forward to seeing all of your work, and I hope you are staying safe.